Fry's perspective. You heard Tom Homan's perspective on what occurred in Minneapolis. Take us inside your conversations at the White House. What are administration officials saying?
Well, look, Kristen, it was the White House that came out in the earliest hours after this tragic shooting with their own assessment, essentially defending the ICE officer, saying that he acted in self-defense before all of the facts had emerged. But now they are just simply hardening their position. They are blaming the woman who was shot. And senior White House officials are telling me that if this conversation turns to being about potentially defunding immigration enforcement, potentially having a government shutdown, I was told that is a fight that they would relish, that they would welcome. But we know that this president has tried a law and order approach before critical elections with mixed results, and it comes at a time where more and more Americans are expressing concerns about the tactics that were used specifically here by ICE. So it sets up just a huge, huge potential divide.
Well, it's fascinating reporting, Monica. J-Mart, I mean, that fact that the administration feels emboldened by this argument. They say, okay, bring it on. And yet at the same time, I thought it was notable, Tom Homan struggled when I asked him about Kristi Noem's allegation of domestic terrorism. He basically said, I'm not sure all the information that she has. Right. What does that tell you about those initial assessments that Monica's talking about?
Well, he didn't want to embrace that description for obvious reasons, because I think he smells the politics of that being pretty rough. Look, if you take a step back for a minute, since Trump came into office almost a year ago, his numbers have come down on a variety of major issues, healthcare, the economy. He's held up pretty strong, though, on immigration, which was really one of his signature issues in the 24 campaign. What they're doing now puts that at risk, because you're A, motivating the left, and you're alienating the broad center of this country when you pursue tactics like they are with these ICE raids. People don't want this. And by the way, if you don't believe me, look at what Homan said during the interview. He drops the reference to this Fox News report about all of the bad guys who are being rounded up. It just so happens that over the weekend, Fox News put out these mug shots and a terrible sort of litany of crimes committed by folks ICE had rounded up. They're doing that because they know politically they're losing their advantage on the issue, and they're trying to shift the focus back to the bad guys.
Stephen, is that an accurate assessment of the strategy?
Yeah, look, I mean, Republicans are on very solid ground when they're talking about the disastrous immigration policy of the Biden administration. It was a disaster. Virtually nobody defends it on the Democratic side right now. When they're talking about sanctuary cities, Republicans are on very solid ground talking about sanctuary cities, and you saw Mayor Fry, I think, have difficulty answering your questions about sanctuary cities. Where they lose support is exactly where J-Mart. These tactics, this kind of deportation, you saw this in the AP poll that was out last month. You saw a slide from Republicans supportive of the president's policies of 8 points. You saw a bigger slide from independents supporting the president's policies because they don't like this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jamel, talk about the politics of this for Democrats. As Stephen and J-Mart are saying, it's quite complicated. There are also some comparisons being made to George Floyd and the protests that we saw in the wake of that. How do you see this unfolding?
I mean, I think the politics of this can be actually quite advantageous for Democrats, in part because, as J-Mart points out, the administration is alienating the broad middle of the American public here. Last year, during the controversy over the removal of Kilmar Abrego-Garcia, you saw a similar dynamic play out where the administration was like, this is strong positioning for us, but the broad public is like, we don't like the idea of people just being snatched and sent to a foreign prison. Likewise here, we don't like the idea of masked men snatching people on the streets and shooting Americans. And I think Democrats have a lot of space to push against that.
Well, so much of what we were talking about is how the president has chosen to wield his authority. In an interview with the New York Times this week, he was asked about that on the world stage. How does he see the limits of his authority? Let's take a look at that and get everyone's reaction on the other side.
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop, and that's very good. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people.
Monica, powerful proclamation there.
It all boils down to this. This is a total encapsulation of how he does view the limits or lack thereof on his power. And you can see it in the last couple of days from what he is essentially instructing oil companies to do with regards to Venezuela. They have expressed some skepticism. Or when you talk about Greenland and the idea that this president is serious about this, and you have world leaders acknowledging that right now, even though officials there are saying Greenland is not for sale, he says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. That is everything you need to know about his thinking.
There were nascent signs on Capitol Hill this week of some pushback against President Trump's power. Because of language like that. Look, 1 week after he takes out Maduro, extraordinary daring operation, Donald Trump keeps getting in his own way politically. He gives comments like that to the New York Times. He openly floats the idea of using an armed force to seize Greenland from a NATO ally. He's his own worst enemy politically, and he's inviting, for the first time, Steve's going to be shocked here, but signs of pushback from his own party on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, nascent but tepid, right? I mean, you had some very gentle pushback from Republicans on a couple of votes, some rhetorical pushback from Republicans, but I think as a descriptive matter, this is what Donald Trump has always believed. Both, I think, here at home and abroad, he's just saying it out loud. And you notice that you haven't had Republicans rushing to microphones to say, no, Mr. President, there are constraints on your power beyond your morality.
Yeah, I did say the quiet part out loud. Jamel, what do you think the implications are? Will Democrats focus on this at all, or do you think they'll shift focus back to domestic issues?
I mean, I'm sure they'll shift focus back to domestic issues because that's where they're strongest. But I just have to say, this is such a profoundly... It's antithetical to how presidents throughout this country's history have thought about themselves and thought about their office. One president that Donald Trump has said that he kind of looks up to or sees as a model is Andrew Jackson, noted populist Andrew Jackson. In Andrew Jackson's first inaugural, Andrew Jackson says, or calls himself an instrument of the federal Constitution, and that he would keep steadily in view the limitations and the extent of the executive power, trusting thereby to discharge the functions of my office without transcending its authority. Even Andrew Jackson understood that at the end of the day, he was bound to something.
Politically speaking, could this in any way harm him as we face the midterms?
Absolutely, because Americans want the focus to be on them, not one man's vanity and far-reaching ambition to be on Mount Rushmore, win the Nobel Peace Prize, and name everything in Washington after himself.
Yeah, and Monica, he's going to shift focus back to domestic issues this week.
He is going to be traveling to Michigan on Tuesday, and he's going to give a broad economic speech. And so they are going to try to unveil some potential new economic proposals. You've seen him talk more about housing. You've seen him talk about credit card limits. They are trying to make that argument, while certainly the president's mind is very, very focused on issues overseas.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Great conversation.